OpenAI's ChatGPT took the world by storm a year ago and saw a flurry of tech companies eager to partner with the startup. Earlier this month, OpenAI reported 92% of Fortune 500 companies are currently using its products, with roughly 2 million developers building custom uses on its platforms. One company is Appian. The software company automates business processes for its clients, and several of its systems services integrate ChatGPT. Appian's founder and CEO, Matt Calkins, joins us with more on how he's been viewing the chaos that's played out over the last 5 days. I'd imagine, Matt, that you've sort of been watching from afar, maybe a little nervous to see what's going to happen within OpenAI, but how have you been making sense of what has transpired over the last 5 days?
Yeah, now, of course, I'm watching it from the outside. I'm not on the board, not inside these discussions. But what it seems like is we've just had a breakdown, a kind of a governance failure, a different point of view between management and the board. And I can totally see how this happens. You know, in our industry, the software industry, we've got a lot of talented, essential, and sometimes unpolished people. And the board's job is to educate, not necessarily to discipline, but to try to smooth the edges without killing the golden goose. I started Appian when I was 26, and it's possible that I tested the patience of my board a few times as well.
So when you look at the current board makeup now, some of the names that are still being thrown out here, does that make you feel better about this issue of balancing the risks of AI with also the growth of the technology?
Yeah, well, I do think that we have a chance to restart now. OpenAI, I don't think this weekend solved any of the problems. Whatever problems existed there, we've still got them, but we have a chance for a reset. The issues are on the table, and I think we've got the best possible way now to address them in a professional manner. So that's good. It does really say something though about this industry. OpenAI is a flagship in AI. And we've had a close glimpse inside of how they work in the past few days. We see they're less than 1,000 people. We see that they've got this kind of a disagreement, this conflict between the board and the governance, that maybe nothing's perfect. It's really interesting to see what an absolute leader in AI looks like right now. And I think it's a signal to the rest of us that this is a growing and not necessarily a very mature industry in a lot of ways. This is what the bleeding edge looks like.
Matt, it's tough to believe that it's just been a year since the world has been introduced to ChatGPT. But talk to me about how Appian integrates OpenAI's technology and why that was a partnership that made sense for you. Has that idea shifted?
Yeah, it's been just a year. It's amazing. I think it was a year ago today that broke out. We use OpenAI thoroughly in our product. And speaking not just for Appian here, but for our industry generally, the combination of generative AI and process automation is a beautiful thing. We could take a form and turn that form automatically into an application, collecting all the data, routing it to the right place, handling it like a case. It's amazing what you can do when generative AI is turned toward building a process, not just textual output. We also use it as a co-pilot to help you develop applications. We use it as a way to query vast volumes of text in order to understand their meaning quickly. The marriage of process automation and AI, specifically OpenAI's generative technology, has been extraordinarily productive.
But Matt, when you have a visionary CEO who literally the workforce is willing to move with him if he was going to move, if the board didn't get its act together, what does that mean in terms of the potential for perhaps diversifying or even developing your own in-house that doesn't rely on ChatGPT and OpenAI?
Well, look, as much as I admire what OpenAI has done, I think it's essential that every organization diversify their dependence on AI. You've seen here that these organizations that create the very cutting edge concepts are fluid, right? That they're subject to change. And so at Appian, we have partnerships with many AI providers, and we use the technology from many of them in our product. And I think that's just prudent for any organization that's making a big bet on AI today.
And Matt, there's certainly a debate that's happening within AI about whether, in fact, this should be open source, whether this should be developed privately, how much transparency should exist. Kind of talk to me about how you're thinking about it and how you've kind of shifted, or whether, in fact, you have, as a result of what's played out at OpenAI.
Yeah, all right. Well, the privacy question comes down to safety. And I think a lot of the reason why a lot of people want to get inside how AI is being developed is because they want to be sure it's kept safe. And I understand that had something to do with this weekend's events as well, concerns about how worried we all are about safety. I think that the proposal to have the government look into red team data that came out of the White House a couple of weeks ago was a constructive first, very, very small and not particularly effective step, but it's a step. I think the main way we're going to keep this safe is not by forcing it to be closed, right, or forcing that there be no open source AI, but rather by regulating the data on which AI is trained. That's the key lever, and I'm surprised to date to see how little regulatory attention there is around this obvious avenue. The way to keep AI safe is not by limiting who can do it, or who can see it, or who can use it, but rather on what data can be trained to create these AI models, right? If you don't want it to be used to make a dangerous weapon, then you don't train on weapons data. If you don't want to make a new virus, then don't allow it to be trained on viral data. If you don't want it to discriminate, then don't allow it to be trained on data that could create bias. If you don't want people to lose their rights over their own privacy, their copyrighted information, then forbid AI from being trained on that data. I think we're missing a big opportunity here in the regulation of AI to regulate it based on the data that can be put into the AI system. I don't think there's a perfect answer, and I don't think anybody's come up with a really credible way to keep AI safe per se. It's just too powerful for that. But I do think that we should be focusing on what data goes in.
On that point about regulating data, who should be driving the conversation? Is it entrepreneurs like Sam Altman, or should it be up to lawmakers in DC?
It should not be entrepreneurs like Sam Altman, and it should not be big tech. And I think that big tech has far too large of a voice today in the regulation of their own industry. You can see this in the White House resolution that came out recently, where the obligation of AI is merely to anonymize the data, the personal data that they're training on. That's not nearly enough, and that doesn't defend the rights of the people who create information or who are worried about their own privacy. We should instead expect the government to take the lead and to protect people who protect creators, protect people who own information and who are worried about their privacy. And that is not in the best interests of the people who create generative AI. They want to take every possible data they can get, every information, they will take copyrighted information and train on it if you let them, and private information as well. And I say we should stop letting them. The government needs to take the lead. Industry doesn't want that.
But Matt, is it actually possible for the government to take the lead when this technology is still in its infancy, as we saw the mistakes that were made in regulating the technology surrounding social media companies, that now policymakers are trying to put that genie back in the bottle? Has the horse already left the barn at this point?
No, it has not. No, there's still an open issue as to whether AI is allowed to be trained on copyrighted information. And if it is, then who owns the creation that AI could later make with reference to that copyrighted information, right? There's a lawsuit out there with a couple hundred authors signed on saying AI got trained on their works and now has knowledge of the works that they shouldn't have and can therefore create new works in the same style. And that's an infringement. I believe it is an infringement. I think that this is going to come to the judicial system immediately, and it might as well come to our legislative branch as well. We need to think about who owns what data and whether AI use of that data is an infringement.